Stop everything. Put the phone down. Kill the group chat. Because in the next 60 seconds, the entire 2026 rap ecosystem just got kneecapped in broad daylight, and Kendrick Lamar did not even have to open his mouth to do it. A track list dropped. A producer confirmed. A rumor slid out of a locked studio door in Los Angeles. And within a single afternoon, every Iceman apologist on the timeline went so quiet you could hear the owl emoji accounts wheezing through their VPNs. This is not a rollout. This is a public execution dressed up in a track list. And by the time you finish this video, you are going to understand exactly why the panic in the OVO camp right now is not paranoia, it is prophecy. Smash that like button, subscribe if you have not already, because every single tap on that button is a middle finger raised at the bot farms trying to bury this exact story tonight. We are only about 40 seconds in, and I am already telling you, this one is different. This one is the fuse. Alright, now that we are locked in, let me walk you through what actually detonated inside the last 48 hours, because the pieces are moving faster than the average commentary channel can keep up with. DJ Dahi, the same producer whose fingerprints sit on money trees, the same producer whose textures shaped Don't Kill My Vibe, the same producer sitting on some of the most sacred moments in the Kendrick Lamar catalog, has just officially confirmed his upcoming solo album, and sitting right there on the confirmed track list, in bold letters, is a Kendrick Lamar feature. And that is not the shock. That is only the appetizer. Because sitting on that same track list, right next to him, are Childish Gambino, Vince Staples, Channel Trace, Ravyn Lenae, Buddy, Amber Mark, and a stacked deck of names that reads less like a producer project and more like a hand-picked, invitation-only Grammy afterparty pressed into vinyl. That alone should have shattered the internet in half. That alone should have been the story of the week. But it is not, because Piece 2 is already leaking through the cracks. Because right behind that reveal, the whispers seeping out of the studio circuit are lining up on one direction, and one direction only. He has already laid vocals down for Schoolboy Q's upcoming release too. And when you remember that Schoolboy Q closed out the final leg of the Grand National Tour with him, when you remember that these two were sharing dressing rooms, sharing tour buses, sharing hotel floors, sharing green rooms, sharing the same city block in every stop, this whisper stops sounding like a wild reach and starts sounding like the most obvious dot connecting itself. Two black hippie brothers. One rolling tour operation. Mobile studios in every city they touched. What did anyone honestly think was going to come out of that except a stockpile of unreleased fire waiting for a release window? Well, that release window is knocking on the door right now, and he is holding the key. Now hold up, because I need you to sit with this next part carefully, because the Mallory Brothers just crawled onto a podcast and delivered what has to be one of the most reality-detached hot takes I have heard on any Kendrick conversation this year. And I want to quote them accurately, because I do not want anybody in the comments accusing me of strawmanning grown men. They said, and I am paraphrasing precisely here, that his next project is going to be the most important and the most scrutinized album of his entire career. They said Drake and J. Cole both dropped albums that put respect back on their names. And then they insinuated, with a straight face and a microphone in their hand, that Kendrick now needs to do the same exact thing. Well, let me tell you where that framing tips completely sideways, because the entire time these two are stacking that argument, they are conveniently erasing the existence of a little album called GNX. You know, the small independent release that broke Billboard records within a single week. The small independent release that produced the highest grossing rap tour in the entire recorded history of the genre. The small quiet moment that spawned Luther, a record that owned radio rotation for a full calendar year and then kept owning it. The tiny footnote that gave the world Squabble Up, TV Off, and Reincarnated, three anthems that fell out of the mouths of every teenager, every stadium DJ, every barbershop television, and every Super Bowl halftime broadcast on the planet. GNX is not a warm-up. GNX is not a footnote. GNX is a generational statement that keeps charting week after week after week. And the very fact that these guys had to surgically remove it from their timeline to make their argument function tells you everything you need to know about how much water that argument is actually carrying. And it gets messier, because they doubled down. They went on to argue that this next drop is going to be the first time he is releasing music into this level of hate. Well, everybody watching, take a deep breath and rewind the tape with me. Because he dropped GNX with a literal ocean of hate parked at the front door. The owl emoji accounts flooded the timeline within 5 minutes of that album hitting DSPs. They called it mid. They called it trash. They called it embarrassing. They said the tour would flop before it even started. They swore the seats would be empty. They cropped photos from 4 hours before doors opened and paraded them around as evidence of empty stadiums. Kendrick Lamar has been walking into rooms full of hate for over a decade. That is not a new obstacle. That is his home field advantage. That is literally the fuel he burns cleanest on. And you want to talk about scrutiny? He has been under the microscope since Section 80 dropped in 2011. Every single project has been dissected bar by bar, sample by sample, syllable by syllable. Good Kid was scrutinized. To Pimp a Butterfly was scrutinized. Untitled Unmastered was scrutinized. Damn was scrutinized. Mr. Morale was scrutinized. GNX was scrutinized. So the suggestion that this next release is somehow the first time he is walking into criticism is one of the wildest, laziest reaches I have heard on a major podcast platform this entire cycle. And yet, these grown men said it with a straight face like they were breaking a scoop. Well, they were not breaking a scoop. They were auditioning for a check. Now let me pull the curtain back on something even juicier, because DJ Dahi himself sat down in an interview and walked the world through how his creative bond with Kendrick actually began. And this is the piece that puts every OVO Cope tweet from the last week straight into the recycle bin. Dahi said Kendrick was one of the first artists he ever built a mood board around. He said the King was one of the first names he ever manifested working with. And then he told the story of watching him perform alongside Dr. Dre at Coachella and going home that same night and cooking up what would eventually become Money Trees the very next week. That is not a favor verse. That is not an industry handshake. That is not a business plant transaction. That is destiny walking into a studio with work ethic and leaving with an all-time classic. And it should shock exactly 0 people that he is showing back up on Dahi's project years later, because that is not a feature run, that is a family reunion pressed into a track list. But wait, because the layers keep peeling. Somebody who claims they have actually heard the DJ Dahi record with him on it hopped on the timeline and posted their reaction. And what they said should freeze the entire streaming ecosystem in place. They said the sonic direction he is heading in this time is completely different from anything anybody has ever heard from him. Now, whether or not you personally trust the source is beside the point, because history has already answered that question 100 times over. Every single time Kendrick steps behind a microphone, the odds that he shows up with a sound nobody has heard from him before are astronomically stacked. Kendrick does not repeat himself. Good Kid was cinematic jazz soul. To Pimp a Butterfly was funk jazz revolution in a rented church. Damn was radio warfare. Mr. Morale was therapy pressed to wax. GNX was West Coast street opera with the top down. Every project is its own universe. Every project is its own dialect. And now the whispers are saying the next universe is even further out than the last one. The hoes may need to hide indoors for this one, because that is exactly the kind of announcement that resets the entire streaming week the second it lands. Meanwhile, over on the other side of the timeline, Rory sat back on his podcast and casually dropped that Kendrick Lamar is probably still going to walk into 2026 as the #1 rapper in the game. And I want you to actually think about that for a second, because Rory was not exaggerating, he was doing math. He still has an album on deck. He still has confirmed features loaded up. He still has PG Lang, a company that is neck-deep in the Olympics conversation for 2028. He still has a Super Bowl halftime performance sitting in the rearview mirror that scholars are already writing dissertations about. He still has a tour catalog that outgrossed every other rap tour in the recorded history of the genre. If he drops a project tomorrow, and I mean literally tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Pacific, that album is #1, the lead single is #1 on the Hot 100, and the discourse around every other rapper's release gets swallowed whole for a full financial quarter. That is not hype. That is arithmetic. And this is the part that is truly eating at the Drake stan accounts alive, and you can feel it in every reply thread they crawl into. The narrative they spent an entire year trying to construct, that GNX did not really happen, that the beef was overblown, that Iceman was a real response, that Kendrick is somehow scared to drop again, that narrative is disintegrating in front of them in real time. Because the same accounts who erroneously claim Iceman scored some kind of victory cannot name a single record off that project that has done a fraction of what Luther has done to popular culture. Not one. What did I miss? Barely finished a news cycle. Nokia had a moment and evaporated by the following Tuesday. Meanwhile, Luther is still spinning on radio deep into its second year of release. TV Off is still detonating in every stadium DJ set. Squabble Up is still the most requested drop at every West Coast function. And Not Like Us, the record they keep pretending never existed, is still the loudest cultural event any rap song has caused in the last 2 decades. Now, let me back up and tell you exactly why this DJ Dahi feature matters at the technical level, because I do not want anybody sleeping on this piece. When Kendrick shows up on a producer's album, he is not filling a slot. He is not returning a favor. He is there because he shares a spiritual, creative, personal bond with that producer. Dahi produced Money Trees. Dahi shaped worldwide steppers. Dahi has crafted records for Vince Staples and for Channel Trace. Dahi is not somebody you swing by for a throwaway verse. Dahi is somebody you lock yourself in a studio with, kill the phones, and cook something that ends up in the canon. And when Kendrick Lamar sits on a track list with Vince Staples, Childish Gambino, Ravyn Lenae, Buddy, and Amber Mark, that track list is not being padded, it is being weaponized. These are voices he has been quietly aligning with for years, and now they are all sharing one project, produced by the man who helped him build one of his most sacred records. And can we take a full 30 seconds to talk about Childish Gambino sitting on this thing, because the internet loves to repeat this exhausted talking point that women do not connect with his music. Well, Ticket Data has been demolishing that claim for a decade. His arena tour was overwhelmingly attended by women. Gambino's because the internet fan base is the most loyal cross-demographic cult following of the last 15 years in the genre. So the argument that this DJ Dahi lineup is somehow a niche listening party project that mainstream audiences will not gravitate toward is another one of those recycled OVO group chat cope lines that keeps getting curb-stomped by hard numbers. Now let me take you into the darker corner of this whole thing, because this is the part that is going to send certain accounts into meltdown mode. There is a reason the Mallory Brothers built their whole argument around erasing GNX. There is a reason they compared his next project to Drake's Iceman and J. Cole's Fall Off as though those two records accomplished the same thing. There is a reason they used the exact phrase, respect back on their names, when they talked about Drake and Cole. And that reason is very simple. When you put these projects side by side and honestly measure their impact, Iceman has to be inflated with a bicycle pump just to fit inside the same sentence as GNX. Streams can be gamed. Streams have been gamed. Drake's own legal filings have argued in court that platform metrics are manipulable. But cultural footprint cannot be gamed. Cultural footprint is measured in how many kids you hear yelling your lyrics in the parking lot after the football game. And on that scoreboard, GNX is winning by a landslide that is not even close to close. Now here is where I need to ask you a question, and I want an honest answer in the comments section below. What happens if he bolts Not Like Us onto a GNX Deluxe Edition? Because Drake stapled What Did I Miss to Iceman. If Kendrick mirrors that move in reverse, if he grabs the biggest diss record of the last 2 decades and welds it onto an album that already broke records, the entire streaming ecosystem breaks in half. That project re-enters the #1 spot. That record re-enters the Hot 100. Every playlist gets rewritten overnight. Every radio station reshuffles the rotation. And every Drake Stan account has to log off for a full calendar week to recover. Would you want to see that happen? Drop your answer below, because that response alone is going to tell me exactly how ready this comment section is for what is coming next. And speaking of what is coming, let me pull you deeper into the implications of this DJ Dahi collaboration, because there is another layer that almost nobody in the mainstream commentary space is even touching. Kendrick Lamar is not guest featuring on a producer album out of politeness. He is building an ecosystem. He is stitching together an alliance of artists, engineers, producers, visual directors, and creative partners who share his taste, his standards, and his refusal to be handled by industry middlemen. That is the same reason PG Lang exists. That is the same reason he took the Super Bowl on his own terms with his own creative direction. That is the same reason he is showing up on Dahi's album with Vince Staples in the room instead of chasing the algorithm-safe feature circuit that Drake and Young Thug and every other formulaic radio act runs on. Kendrick is not making moves for the moment. He is making moves for the era. And that era is being documented in real time, right in front of your eyes, whether the commentary channels can catch up or not. Now let me speak to the people in the back one more time, loud and clear. The idea that he has to prove himself with this next album is one of the most manufactured, dishonest, lazy narratives that has ever been shoved into the culture with a straight face. This is a man with a Pulitzer Prize sitting on his shelf, a Pulitzer, the same award given to Toni Morrison and Bob Dylan. This is a man with multiple Grammys stacking up like coasters. This is a man with Emmys attached to a Super Bowl halftime performance that critics are already ranking inside the top 3 halftime shows of all time. This is a man halfway to EGOT status while other rappers are begging podcast hosts for a lifetime achievement plaque. What exactly is Kendrick supposed to be proving? To whom? Under what standard? Because there is no artist in his lane, no artist in his tier, no artist in his generation currently outperforming him on the fundamentals of the craft. The scoreboard has not been close since 2024. And these podcasts that keep insisting he has a hill to climb are climbing a much bigger hill of denial than anything he has ever had to face in his life. Let me tell you what is actually going to happen. He is going to drop this next album, and it is going to arrive with the same surprise release energy he has become known for. He does not do bloated rollouts. He does not do 6-month teaser campaigns. He does not do listening parties in 12 cities with a bottle service tab. Kendrick drops. And when Kendrick drops, the world reorients around him. And when the world reorients, the same accounts that were tweeting that he was scared, that he was hiding, that he was retired, that he was cooked, will scramble to delete their tweets within the hour and pretend they never existed. That cycle has repeated so many times at this point that it is basically a scheduled event on the hip-hop calendar. Kendrick drops. All accounts delete. Rinse. Repeat. And there is one final piece I need you to sit with before we wrap this entire thing up, because it is the piece that exposes the commentary class the hardest. Some of these podcasts are now floating the theory that Kendrick Lamar might not even release another album because he made too much money off GNX. And that theory shows you exactly how little these people understand this artist. He does not chase checks. He chases the sentence. He is the same guy who was rumored to be recording verses in Disney World with Dave Free during an actual family vacation. He is the same guy who has multiple engineers on retainer to catch him the moment the pen strikes. He is the same guy who has told interviewers repeatedly that he does not stop writing because writing is the mechanism that keeps him breathing correctly. Trying to argue that Kendrick might simply walk away from the music is like trying to argue that the ocean might get bored of the moon. The gravity is baked in. So when the Mallory Brothers, or any other commentator, or any owl emoji account on the timeline tries to convince you that Kendrick has to justify himself with this next release, I need you to remember one very simple thing. The pressure on this album is not sitting on his shoulders. The pressure on this album is sitting on everybody who spent the last 18 months lying about him. Because when this project lands, the receipts land with it. And the receipts do not miss. Now, let me hear from you, because I know your opinions are stacked to the ceiling on all of this. Are you rocking with this DJ Dahi feature announcement? Do you actually think a Schoolboy Q collaboration is dropping before the end of this quarter? Do you think Kendrick takes the #1 rapper title for 2026 uncontested? And most importantly, are the Drake stans in this comment section prepared to actually engage with reality this time, or are they going to run the same recycled tweet templates for another 365 days? Drop your answers below, because I genuinely want to see what this comment section is made of. If you made it to this point in the video, hit that like button and subscribe if you have not already, because this channel does not run on OVO checks. This channel runs on you. Every single like, every single comment, every single share pushes back against a bot farm that has been trying to bury real hip-hop coverage all year long. And every time we push back, we gain a little more territory in the algorithm. Massive shout out to every single YouTube member on this channel, because that support is what keeps the lights on, keeps the research deep, keeps the receipts fresh, and keeps this whole conversation honest. Huge appreciation to everybody sending super thanks, because that has been genuinely humbling, and I do not take a single one of them for granted. And listen, if you want to follow this story in real time, the link to my X account is pinned in the description and in the top comment. That is the fastest way to send me tips, leaks, screenshots, videos, and everything else you want me to break down next. Because with what is about to come out of the Kendrick camp, out of the DJ Dahi camp, out of the Schoolboy Q camp, and out of the PG Lang camp over the next few weeks, we are going to be busy. Very, very busy. But before you go, I want to leave you with one final thought. Kendrick Lamar has spent the last 2 years walking through a level of noise that would have ended most careers. Kendrick Lamar walked through Drake's lawsuits. He walked through the OVO campaign. He walked through the podcast circuit trying to rewrite history in real time. He walked through the accusations, the memes, the fake insiders, the bot armies, the fake stream reports, the empty stadium hoaxes, the fake feature leaks, and every other tactic that got thrown at him. And he walked through all of it without answering a single question outside of the music. That right there is the answer. That is the whole answer. That is what real ones do. And that is exactly what he has done, is doing, and is about to keep doing on a level that is going to make 2024 look like a warm-up jog around the block. So the next time somebody wanders into your comments section, into your group chat, into your barber shop, into your feed, and tries to convince you that Kendrick has something to prove, hand them GNX. Hand them Luther. Hand them TV off. Hand them Not Like Us. Hand them the Super Bowl halftime numbers. Hand them the Grand National Tour receipts. Hand them the Emmys, the Grammys, and the Pulitzer. And when they finish reading, ask them one simple question. What exactly has anybody else in this era done at this level? Then wait for the silence. Because the silence is the answer, every single time. And let me leave you with this final receipt, because this is the part that is going to sting the loudest inside the OVO group chat tonight. Every single rapper Kendrick has been compared to over the last 2 years has already blinked. Drake dropped Iceman, and the internet moved on within a weekend. J. Cole released Fall Off, and it landed with the impact of a dropped pin in a stadium concourse. Young Thug walked out of prison, released an entire apology album to Drake, and could not even secure a proper first-week bump. Lil Baby announced a retirement. Future and Metro have been in witness protection since the summer of 2024. And in the middle of all that fallout, Kendrick Lamar is the one showing up on other people's projects, dominating award shows, running the halftime, running the tour circuit, running the streaming charts, and now aligning with the most respected producer in the entire West Coast ecosystem for what is shaping up to be one of the most stacked albums of the entire year. Every direction you turn, he is winning. Every metric you check, he is winning. Every conversation you enter, he is winning. And every podcast that tries to reframe that as somehow a weakness is exposing themselves in the process. This is not a hot streak. This is a new baseline. This is the new normal. And the sooner people accept that, the sooner these conversations can actually move forward instead of running the same recycled circle for another calendar year. Now, if you want to see what I broke down right before this, I dropped a full deep dive on the exact moment Drake stans realized Iceman was slipping off the charts, and I promise you, the comments section on that video is wilder than anything you have read tonight. Check out the suggested video, and I will see you in the next one.